Welcome back, everybody, to the Sunday's Coming podcast. We took a break off in July. We're back and ready for action with our friend Jon Jorgenson.
Hello.
Welcome.
At the table. And so we're glad to be back.
Yeah.
We both took some vacations. I came back sunburned.
I'm sure a lot of the people listening also had their summer vacation sagas happen over the last month or so.
Yeah, people disappear in July.
It's true.
And like I feel like the amount of emails that like I'll send to like random church people and it's just immediate bounce back. And then all of a sudden like August 1st, I'll start to get a bunch of response emails like, oh, hey, sorry, man, it's been 3 weeks.
Yeah,
but
I've wished for a while that we in the U.S. could adopt more of a European mindset of like, why don't we just give everyone July off?
I was talking.
We already kind of do it anyway.
Totally. And let's just organize it a little bit better.
Organize it.
I was talking to a guy who's from Great Britain on Sunday, and he's like, oh, yeah, I'm going on a vacation with my family coming up here, for
Nice
6
holiday.
days. And I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. 6 days. That's a great vacation. He's like, no, that's not. It should be 3 times longer than that.
That's a weekend trip for
right.
them,
Exactly. No, that's exactly what he said. I was like, okay.
What our long vacation is a weekend trip for them.
That was exactly it.
I do like, I want to take a whole month off July. I did take a lot of time off in July. So.
You just got to make it happen. Chart your own course. No one's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Make it happen.
My biggest problem with vacations, and I did this in ministry, and I'm still doing it today, which is probably a problem, is I bank all of this PTO, and I basically take it all in the month of July. And I'll do random little things throughout the year. But the problem is when I get back from vacation, which for me was on Tuesday, and I was like, ooh, I don't have another break until Christmas or, whatever that looks like, which is kind of a annoying thing. I need to do more of I'm going to take a Monday and a Friday off. And
some mini breaks here.
A mini break.
Yeah, your long weekend.
Yeah, I guess I can do that now because I'm not in full-time ministry.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing.
You
Is
don't have to be on Sunday.
That's not a thing that I think about doing because I never could do it before.
Right.
I'm like, I'm just going to take a Monday and Friday off. That's dumb because I still got to work Saturday and Sunday, but I don't have to anymore. So sorry for everybody listening who has to.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I still do. I still don't take Sundays off, but it's okay. That's all right.
Anyways, well, we're back. We're glad to have you.
Glad to be here, genuinely.
I'm excited for our conversation. I was thinking about our first time that we, were together and in Anaheim.
Yep.
At Philo. That was kind of a funny year too, in Anaheim, because we had done that conference here for, in Chicagoland for so many years, and then we were like, let's go to Southern California, and I don't know if you felt like this, but the culture of West Coast compared to us in the Midwest was very, very different. That was with the church we were at.
Yes.
That was with the attendees. Like I remember our team, like we are.
Yeah.
Lots of Enneagram 6s in the room. And we were a little bit shocked by the loosey-goosiness of people on the West Coast. And that sounds so like dumb because us in the Midwest, it can come across weird. But I remember all of us being like, oh, we need to increase breaks because people are going to take them whether or not we give it to them.
Yeah.
And they didn't show up until 15 minutes before,
Sounds like my
service.
church attendees.
Literally, it was literally exactly like that. And I just remember being like, oh, yeah, we just need to be a little bit more chill. It felt like I was
for sure.
going to a different country on a mission trip.
I remember the first time I used to do a lot of speaking. I still do a decent amount of speaking at different youth camps and whatnot. And the first time I ever did a West Coast youth group summer camp, the boundaries, the dress code, everything. Yep. I was like, we would never get away with this in the Midwest. But it's just it literally is a different culture, in a lot of ways. Yeah,
I like trying to. So when I'm with my wife and we don't have our children with us, we like to play. Where does this person work, or what do they do for a living?
Yes.
And we were in the airport a month ago or so, and we were just watching people, and we're like, oh, that guy's runs a surf shop in Southern California. Yeah. This guy's runs a bike shop in Breckenridge, all the classic types of things. Because it's easy to. Sorry for anybody from California. It's kind of easy to pick you out. It's probably easier to pick me out too.
It's easy to pick out people who work in church production too.
It is. So that's another.
At least
game.
if you've ever worked in church production.
Were you walking around with us at NAB? And we were.
We were guessing who are the church people.
We were all we all walked together and we all just go, hey, we know who works at churches at these,
industry
convention of
And you kinda know
100,000
what job
people.
they have too.
100%. Like, oh, there's the lighting guy.
Yep.
There's the audio dude. There's the creative guy.
Yep.
It's so funny because you can just pick them out of crowd, dude. Like
We
so
all
fast.
have a uniform. We all have a
It's so funny.
and a swagger. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're the
Anyway,
creative guy.
or a lack of
that, fair.
Yeah, we do all dress the same though. But
I mean, all black all the time. You can't go wrong.
yeah, we didn't.
You never get dirty. Like,
Yeah.
didn't really coordinate our
I know.
outfits today.
Well, you know that if you wore black, you're probably wearing the same thing as me every day.
Well, that's why I did not wear black today.
I mean, that
'cause
was
I
smart.
feel like
That was smart.
Caleb are probably gonna be wearing.
I
Black,
do love your
so
shirt though.
Thank you. For
Original
those
beef,
in
Chicagoland.
the
Yep.
audio format, it is from the Beef of Chicagoland. Shout out to the bear. Who,
Such a great
fun,
show.
Fun thing, the guy who owns like Mr. Beef, that the bear is based off of, attends Soul City.
Really?
Yeah, his name's Mike. He has gotten us sandwiches many times, walks his German Shepherd around the West Loop nonstop.
That's awesome.
Sweetest dude in the world. Invited me to come. He's like, you got to stop by while they're filming at some point. I couldn't do it. But who knows? Maybe for, season 5 or something.
Well, and
Season 4,
they
season 5.
filmed a bunch of that at Alenia too.
Mhm, yes.
I want to go to Alenia really bad.
Yes.
If anybody wants to take me to Alenia,
Yeah.
I always say to my wife, like, hey, every like birthday or like big thing, I always think, man, is she gonna like do this? And she's
is this
like,
the year?
I don't like eating anything but pizza and mac and cheese, so I'm not gonna be the one to take you to Alenia, but
Yeah.
we should go to Alenia.
But maybe.
Wait, your wife says that she doesn't like
Oh
eating
yeah, no, she
anything?
doesn't.
What?
She wouldn't want to eat any of the stuff that they provided for her. So I'm like,
But-
dude, I don't want to go with you.
I
I
mean,
love you, but I don't want to go with you.
Shout out to season 2 of The Bear with no spoilers here, but the Richie episode where he's working in the restaurant and they want deep dish pizza. They made it for him right
Yes.
there. So maybe
Yes.
you show up at Alenia, you're like, my wife loves mac and cheese.
Yes.
They'll make you the best mac and cheese
That's true.
you've ever had.
Hey, if you're paying $1,000 a person for dinner, I would sure hope they could do something like that.
Everyone
So-
who's not from Chicago is like, what the heck are they talking about?
the only 3 Michelin star restaurant in Chicago. I've never had the opportunity to go to a 3 Michelin star ever. I think I've only been to 1 star. And that was amazing. Incredible experience. But it's so good. Okay, side
All
note.
right, food.
Hold on, side note really quick.
We're gonna come back.
The Black Truffle Explosion. Okay, if you watch Chef's Table season 1, Grant Ashaz, who's the head chef of Alenia, has this dish called Black Truffle Explosion. I got invited down to the Aviary, which is like their cocktail bar, a couple years ago with some friends.
Aviary.
And we were ordering, and I was like, ooh, Black Truffle Explosion, that's so cool. I want to order that. But it was like $15 or $16. And I was like, oh, maybe I can just split it with, one of the guys I was with. So waitress comes over, and I'm like, hey, can we like split this? She's like, it's 1 bite. And I was like, okay, we'll take 2. And like, I felt like an idiot for asking that. But then I was like, that was worth $16 for the
How do
1
you
bite or
split
whatever.
a tablespoon?
Like, I mean, it's literally, it's a spoon. And it has the 1 piece of pasta with
Wow.
the explosion
Dang.
on the inside.
and it was worth it.
It was totally worth it. It was like, it was very, very good. So,
I love that.
anywho,
Someday.
3 Michelin stars. Somebody take me.
We'll get there.
Back to things in Chicago and you.
John, you're in Chicago all the time, like
Uh-huh.
for work every day downtown.
For work in the West Loop. Shout out to Soul City Church and
awesome.
everyone there.
So, when did you come on staff at Soul City? And what did you do maybe leading up to that? Because
Could you tell us your whole life story?
yeah.
Sure. So I came on staff at Soul City full time in September 2020.
Okay.
Weird time to hire someone for sure. But they had a lot of trust, I guess, in me. I didn't realize it at the time, but they definitely did. And I'm grateful for it. But previous to that, I had been attending the church for several years, had been volunteering and contracting in some ways, was a volunteer on the teaching team. I think I'd been teaching on and off for about 2 years there already. So it was the type of thing where I came on staff and it was a shock to everyone to find out that I wasn't already on staff, even to certain staff members. They were like, wait, we just thought you didn't have to come to staff meeting. No.
We resented you. 'cause
We
we're like, how do
resented
we
you.
get to
We
not
thought
come
you
to-
got special treatment. It's like, no, I just didn't get a paycheck. So I came on staff in September 2020. However, like my background that kind of led to it, my formal background is in acting and musical theater. It's what I did growing up in a lot of ways. It is what I went to undergrad for. I went to drama school at a school in Pittsburgh. And then post-graduating with my BFA in acting and musical theater, the thing to do is move to New York and do theater or LA and do film. I chose New York. And so that's what I did. After graduating, I moved to New York and worked as an actor there for several years. But that was like side A of the narrative.
Yeah.
Side B that was happening simultaneously. My summer job throughout high school and college, I worked at this summer camp with middle schoolers and then eventually high schoolers. And one of many things that I did as a part of that job is I was sort of in charge a few years of doing these like mini devotionals, not full sermons, just a little thing to give them to think about before they would go into their small groups at the end of the night. And at the time, I didn't consider myself a pastor, nor did I have any desire to be a pastor. But I did consider myself an artist. And because I was, going to drama school and studying Shakespeare and classical theater and poetry, the best thing that I knew how to do was write. And I would write these original pieces that at the time people were calling spoken word poetry, even though I didn't know it was called that at the time. I was just writing what I felt God placed on my heart. Just little poems about identity or about hope or about, how God sees you or whatever it is. And I wrote a bunch of these over the years and shared them at these camps. After I graduated college, I stopped working at the camp because I was full-time working as an actor in New York. But I still sort of wanted this ministry outlet, as it were. Very, very quickly, when I was in college, I started to feel this tension between the artistic actor, performer side of me and then the ministry side. While I didn't want to be a pastor or work in ministry, when I was at that camp, I had a lot of people kind of approach me or speak into my life of, have you ever thought about ministry? Or wouldn't you want to be a youth pastor? You're really good at this aspect of it. Or when you speak, the kids really listen, or God's using you in this way. And so all of a sudden there was this kind of tension that popped up in my life that continued for many years between this ministry passion in gifting and then also this artistic passion in gifting. So I graduate and I still wanted a ministry outlet because I was working as an actor in New York at the time, which meant I was working in the evenings.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about theater is you're what people do when they're off of work. And so you work when they're off of work. So you work nights, weekends, holidays.
I never really thought about that.
End of story. Yeah, it's sort of like working in a restaurant. You keep the same hours, essentially. I would leave for work at about 5:30 or 6, and I'd get home at around midnight, 1 a.m.
That's crazy.
Boom, again.
Yeah.
So I had my days free, to say the least. And so I could have a ministry outlet. I started to take all those poems and things I'd written at the camps over the years, and I just started filming them and putting them on YouTube. And this was 2013, so it was before like everyone had a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what it meant to have a YouTube channel or be a YouTuber. I just knew that I basically thought of YouTube at the time like we think of like a lot of people think of Vimeo right now, where like it's
Long-term
just or
storage.
Dropbox. It's just long-term storage.
Right.
Yep.
That's kind of how I thought about it. And really I wanted to have a place where all of the campers who these pieces had spoken to over the years, I wanted them to be able to go back and watch them again. That was it.
Aren't you glad that you picked YouTube to upload to and not Vimeo?
Come on.
Like,
gosh.
imagine how different your life would have gone.
For real. Because, when I started to upload those videos, pretty quickly they started to get some like old school viral traction where they started to get passed around to different Facebook groups. And I remember I was driving to New York. I was moving my stuff to New York post college, and I got this call, or I got an email from a pastor at a church down in Florida. And at this point, one of the videos that I'd uploaded had maybe like 10,000 views on YouTube, and I was like, that's really cool. I never thought it would get that many. And the email said, hey, we saw your video on YouTube and we uploaded it to our Facebook page, and it has 200,000 likes right now in less than a week. And he linked it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is going viral on their Facebook page. Yep. And sure enough, those people eventually made their way over to YouTube, and then we were off to the races. And so when I was living in New York, working as an actor, perform at night, and spent all of my days, creating different YouTube content, really all ministry based, whether it was the spoken word poetry stuff. I did like a weekly Bible study for about 3 to 4 years. I started a bunch of different like fun little short video series, like the series called Can a Christian, where I would talk about like, can a Christian cuss, or can a Christian listen to, music with swear words or whatever,
Edgy youth group stuff.
Super edgy youth group stuff. Well, what's funny about it is I found out kind of through the grapevine, a lot of youth groups were using that content.
Sure.
You know, I would do this thing called 7-minute sermons, and I would do a series on identity, and that would just become their youth group sermons, and they would be totally
awesome.
free and available for them. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's great. I love that it's a resource.
Yeah.
And I did that for about 3 years. I would perform in the evening, and then I would make videos during the day. That's what I did.
That's crazy, man. Do you, from the content creation standpoint for that, do you feel like, because that like makes me anxious going, I have all day, what should I do or what could I do? Like how, do you feel like you struggled with coming up with new ideas, or was that just like so, it sounds like it's so natural for you that maybe it wasn't a problem, but I don't know.
I think one thing I didn't realize about myself until I started working at Soul City, and I have incredible bosses there. My direct manager right now is our executive pastor, Kelly Skiles. And one thing she pointed out about me very quickly when she started managing me was my left and right brain are pretty equally weighted, especially for someone who does a lot of stuff in the arts, a lot of stuff on stage, a lot of writing and content creation. But my like logical admin side of my brain, my planning side of my brain, I love systems so much. They give me so much life. And I also like making stuff.
Yeah.
And so that worked to my advantage as a content creator, because I had very little problem coming up with, great, here's, if I want to upload 2 videos a week every single week and do a daily vlog, so that comes out to 9 total videos a week, here's how I can do it. I know I can edit in these hours, and it just kind of, I almost just see it, you know, like a lot of systems people do. I can see it before I can put it on paper. I can see it in my head. But then I also have the side of my brain that when it's time to like write the content, the ideas can come and all of that. So I think that's
awesome.
what it was for me.
That's cool though.
Yeah.
That would make a lot of sense that your left and right brain are pretty equal. Even just like
It's
doing
like a
what you're doing now.
superpower.
It is a superpower.
It was something that just kind of came naturally to me for a long time. And I'm slowly learning that it is a kind of rare gift that I have. And I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Oh my gosh. So now after all that, you joined the staff in 2020 at Soul City. And what's your role there now? And what are you kind of doing there now?
Sure.
Well, we skipped even how you got out of acting though.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you got
yeah.
to back up and hear like
Yes.
what brought that change?
So it was the gift of an injury. So I was performing in a show in New York. I performed 8 times a week. Was in the show for about like 2.5 years.
It's long.
Yeah,
It's a lot of
long
shows.
run. A lot of fun. However, at one point I got injured. We were in the Act 1 finale dance number. I'm supposed to lift a girl over my head, and I go to lift her, and I hear a pop in my back. I herniated 3 discs, L3, L4, L5.
gosh.
I was 23 years old at the time. And because of that, I got 8 weeks off of the show, paid, to heal and get better. Because not only did I hurt my back, then I performed on an injured back for about 6 months.
Oh, jeez.
I got to the point, couldn't tie my own shoes. I'm like, I probably need to take some time off. So they gave me 8 weeks off the show. And because my YouTube channel had started to get popular, I started to get these invitations from people. Hey, come to our youth conference. We want you to say your poem. Would you visit our youth group? Would you go to our event? But I was performing 8 shows a week, working 6 days a week. I did not have the capacity. And I couldn't work remote either. That's the interesting thing about being an actor. You know, you kind of need the body on the stage.
Yep.
But I now had 8 weeks. And as long as I went to my physical therapy, I had freedom. And so I did about 4 different speaking engagements during that time. And what I noticed this stark difference between when I would get off stage performing in that show in New York versus when I would get off stage at these, and a lot of times like small, tiny church events, you know, in the Midwest or in the South, how much I felt so much more connected to the people, so much more just connected to myself and to God. And that started to, again, the tension was brought back of the artist side of me and the ministry side, because now the ministry side was starting to feel more in line with where I felt led, where I felt called to the degree that I could say that at the time. And so pretty soon after that, we got news that the show that I was in was closing. It had been running in New York for 13 years at the time.
That's crazy.
And so it was this interesting timing thing, right?
Yeah.
Because I start to get this inkling that maybe I'm not supposed to be an actor anymore. but I'm in this show that's running for forever and is never going to close. And less than a month after I get that inkling, we get news that the show's closing.
Interesting.
So I'm like, something's going on here.
Yeah.
So the show closes, and it was a month after my wedding. My wife Erin and I, we moved back to Chicago. I left performing for good, or at least, for now.
It's crazy.
And started on this like ministry path, but I had no idea what that meant. I knew I had this YouTube channel and I loved doing that. I knew that I really enjoyed like traveling and speaking. And what it became over the next 7 years was like a three-headed monster of a YouTube channel, itinerant speaking at different camps, conferences, churches. And then another wing that I found was sort of as like a freelance creative pastor for churches in the Chicagoland area, a church that maybe doesn't have the budget to have a full-time creative pastor, but at Christmas or Easter for a building campaign, they want a creative piece of some sort or some type of video.
Yeah.
They would contract me to come in and help them craft that. And so I did that for about, 7 years. That was like my sort of full-time job, in addition to picking up like video work here and other things, because YouTube had taught me video skills. And so I would second shoot, at different things here and there. But that was primarily the gig for about 7 years. Started attending Soul City about halfway through that time.
Okay.
And once the team there kind of found out that was type of stuff I did, they're like, would you like to do some stuff here and help us out? And Soul City sort of became my church and a client for a little while before I came on staff in 2020.
That's a cool way to like come on staff though, because I think of, I don't think I've ever gone on staff. I haven't gone on staff at a church that was my church before.
That's interesting. That
Like
is, I think, the
applying-
majority of our staff.
Yeah.
At Soul City.
And the majority of your staff came from the
internal.
church. That's great.
Yeah.
And that,
No,
I mean,
I
that
think that's
speaks,
something really special.
it is really special because there's, I don't know, when you jump in as a random guy from the outside, it's very, very hard to maybe it's fit into the existing staff. Because like I think many of my churches I was on staff at, there was a lot of homegrown people. I was from the outside, and it took a long time to feel like I was,
Part of the team.
Yeah, part of the team.
Part of the family.
Yeah, exactly. But that's cool. I love.
You got a very extended job interview.
Yeah, for real, that's what it ends up being for a lot of people. I think the cool thing about it is you're bringing on people who know the culture so well already. I think sometimes, and some of our leadership would tell you some of the difficult parts of it, is we also then have a lot of people for whom this is their first job in full-time ministry.
Yeah.
Versus when you're hiring people from the outside who are like church pros, they are very confident in their calling toward church ministry. Whereas we have a lot of staff members, like myself at the time, who's like, I'm trying this out as a new facet of my career. And sometimes the staying power in that is a little, is less so, or you have someone like me who, by trying something out, discovers like a true calling toward ministry. And that's the case for a lot of people on our staff, but can sometimes be a different side of the coin.
Yeah, I never really thought about it like that of, hey, I'm trying something outside of that. I think I see that the most in like executive pastors, like, oh, I was a CFO for blank company, bank, whatever.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be an XP because I'm, called to it. But there are so many other positions, just like what you're talking about for you, people that have, been able to join a staff based on a calling, not just like, I'm going to seminary, I'm going to go be a pastor, I'm going to go find a job, I'm going to go be there for 3 years, I'm going to move up to the next church and the next church for the next 25 years of ministry.
Yeah.
But that's a much more like special way to look at it, you think?
Yeah, and I think it's reflective of our people at Soul City as well, the people who attend. We're doing job interviews for a few different positions right now, and I was sitting in on a group interview, and they were asking me to describe the people of Soul City. And one of the ways that I said it in a more PC way was like, they're not like church pros, quote unquote. The people who attend our church are not the people who like grew up in it, know all the Bible stories, all of that. If they grew up in any form of church, they've left it for a long time and they're just kind of coming back to it. And so I think it's really nice that our staff is not filled with people who have been in ministry and are doing it and are going to do it forever. And so I think it's nice that it's reflective of the people that we lead in many ways, but specifically in that way, that our people are very much exploring faith, and our staff is not exploring faith, but they are exploring, some of them, they're like the longevity of their call to ministry in some way.
What form does that ministry take, you know?
Right.
Like your ministry obviously has taken many different forms over the years, and it's evolved, and like you now find it expressed in a very specific faith context. So I'd be curious, kind of, you're only a couple years into this Pastor Jon thing. People call you Pastor Jon.
People do.
Yeah, I bet they do.
People do,
Yeah.
which, I mean, we can talk about the pastor thing if you want. Like I said, was never something I saw myself doing, was something I was actively resistant toward for a long time. But I think something I've learned about myself is I often, this is not very good for a pastor to say, but I often start with no with God, usually, especially when it comes to calling or authority or leadership. I think because for a long time, I had this self-limiting belief that I was not a good leader. And so I didn't want the responsibility ever of anything. I didn't want the responsibility of a title. I didn't want the responsibility of leading people or leading a team or shepherding a community. And it really took a few leaders at Soul City, Jarrett and Jeannie Stevens, who are our lead pastors, and then Sarah Emerson, who was our creative pastor at the time. She had partly my job at the time.
You were on staff at the same time, sir.
Yeah, she was our creative pastor at the time when I first came on staff. And I still remember when Sarah sat down with me, not after knowing me very long, and she said at one point, it was during a baptism service, she's like, Jon, you're a pastor. You can call yourself whatever you want. Like, you can take whatever job title you want. You are a pastor. And it was people like that loving it into me and seeing it before I could see it in myself. I have a friend who pastors a church in Indiana, and he calls himself a reluctant pastor. And that's what I think I've been for a long time. I'm becoming less reluctant about it. It's something that I am learning to love.
I think there's an important humility to that, though, to maintain always, of just like, hey, I don't have all this figured out.
Yeah.
I'm stepping into an open door. I'm here to serve, and I'm not charging through as if I have all the answers, and we're going to figure it out together. And like, that's just a great way to come alongside the people that you're pastoring.
Yeah.
And I think something that makes that relationship really special, and like they feel connected to, versus someone who's distant and ahead of them and feels like they have all the answers.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Jarrett calls it like from the platform on a Sunday. He's like, there's a good balance that you want to strike between you have it all figured out and you don't have it any more figured out than they do.
Yeah.
You know, what you want is you want the people to see he has this a little bit more figured out than I do. And maybe just because he's thought about it a little
He's
bit
thought
longer.
about it for a little longer.
You know?
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's it shows authenticity, you know, because I think people, well, you see it in everything, and news articles about things happening in churches all over the country, right? And this massive binoculars that people are looking at and magnifying glass at churches and church staff that are going, this is not as authentic as what you're coming across or trying to come across as. So I like that, you know, I think from that standpoint. And I think, I mean, you talking about the whole Sarah thing, it reminded me of like, some churches would describe it as like prophetic words, right? Sometimes you could get it as spiritual as that, or just like calling somebody higher into something that you see in a person.
Yep.
And you think back to, I'm sure, in areas of, you know, all of our lives where somebody called something out in you, maybe as a child, in college, in high school, whatever it is, right? That eventually led you to, oh, maybe I could, you know, do this in ministry. Maybe I could do whatever it is, you know, in your career. And I just think it's so important that we, as people and leaders in church, like continue to do that, because it's very easy to be passive and do that in a comment on a Instagram reel or a TikTok or whatever it is, you know, and calling somebody up, but it's not the same as going, hey man, I could see you like being a pastor, you know, and whether you take it or leave it, there's areas in my life that I think back and I go, oh my gosh, that person 8 years ago said something to me at a staff retreat that I was like, I don't even know you. And you just came up to me and said this. And whether, you know, he called it a prophetic word or whatever you want to say, it's just calling somebody higher into, you know, being a better person and being, better in where God is calling you. And sometimes you don't see that yourself and somebody else sees it for you.
Yes, I genuinely believe that most of the time we can see it in others before we can believe it about ourselves.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah.
And the language that our transformation pastor, our language, we like to use a lot of take traditional church language and put our own sort of spin on it at Soul City. So our transformation pastor essentially would be a discipleship pastor or community life pastor or whatever it is, in charge of discipleship at our church. His name's Brandon. And he came from a vineyard church, which is very into Holy Spirit leading, prophetic words, all of that. And what he's really brought to our culture as a really approachable way into things like prophetic words is just the simple, when I look at you, I see type thing. And so that's, you'll be hard pressed to come to Soul City on a Sunday and not hear someone say hey, when I look at you, I see da, 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 da.
And it speaks so much life into people.
So much.
And I think it's just easy to avoid it,
Well, I think you can feel a lot more self-conscious about it. Like, what if it's weird, or what if they don't agree with me, or what if,
because it is awkward.
Yes. I like to preface it, with people of hey, I was looking at you and I got this sense. How I've learned to take these, if it means something to you and you trust me, great. If it doesn't mean anything to you and you trust me, maybe hold on to it for later. If it doesn't mean anything to you and you don't trust me, walk away and don't even listen to me,
Yeah, there's so much truth to that. And I just, man.
Yeah, and for leaders, it's, if you carry some weight of influence, it's literally zero cost to you. Just say that encouraging word or to point out that thing that you see in somebody.
Yes.
It's no cost. Like you said, maybe it goes somewhere, maybe it doesn't. But for that person, it can have massive,
it can
massive
completely
influence.
change the trajectory of their life and career and their way they are a spouse or a parent. And, I wish more churches did that. And I think they just get funny about it. You say prophetic anything and people go, I don't want to do that.
But it's just trusting that God gave something to you for somebody else.
100%.
And honestly, it's not for you. So you better give it to them.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. I love that though. I think that's super cool. And what you're doing there.
Well, I'd want to dig into a little more like your transition onto, full-time ministry staff and coming from the theater world, coming from your time doing more of, your variety of ministries, for that 7-year period, like what have you seen translate in and influence the way that you're able to approach what you do now? Like things that you learned in that season that maybe give you a different perspective or a different way of approaching when you have to teach, when you have to create something that's for the church context. What are those things that you see transfer in that kind of inspire what you're doing now?
Yeah, when I think about my background, I mentioned earlier that tension that I felt for so many years between the artist performer side of me, that realm of creativity, and then the more ministry pastoral side. And I viewed those two things as opposites. Like they were, one road went one way, one road went the other. And what's funny is I look at everything that I do day to day, week to week now, and I really do believe, not to spiritualize it like a pastor, but God used every single step of my journey to prepare me for where God has me placed now. I went to drama school and did theater growing up, learning how to be more comfortable on stage than I am off of a stage. That's true about me. The place where I am most comfortable in the world is alone on a stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people. That's crazy. Period. And that's because that's sort of where I grew up. That's where I was bred in the theater world. And now I do that multiple times a month, in a ministry context as a teaching pastor. Whether it's when I was doing theater, I have been interacting and working with and collaborating with technical artists since I was in middle school.
Yeah.
I've been getting a mic put on me and learning how even just like a simple lav mic works since then. And now every single Sunday I'm working with volunteers or having to teach them, hey, a new volunteer, like here's how you put the battery in or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I think about, YouTube and spending so many years having to be the person both in front of the camera and behind the camera. And all of a sudden in 2020, every church, every pastor had to learn how to talk to a camera.
Yep.
And I'd been doing it for 6 years.
Yep.
And so people were asking me like, how do you do it? How would I write a sermon if I know someone's just sitting in their living room?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden God had kind of prepared me with some at least experience, if not expertise on it, but then also being behind a camera. And the fact that on a Sunday, I can be a teaching pastor up there, give the sermon, catch a glimpse of what's on YouTube, and go to our camera operator and be like, hey, this ISO is just a little bit high and it's blown out. Can we bring that down? And then go back and give the sermon again.
That's awesome.
It's just like God gave me this like wildly broad education in all of these ways that I use every single day. So I no longer view those things in tension at all. Like it's all just sort of one road, to the work that I get to do now.
That's
I don't
awesome.
know if that answers the question.
Yeah. I'll be curious, like, as you see yourself even continuing down this road of, developing your voice in ministry, developing new things for your community, like, where do you see it going? Like, how do you see those things continue to build? Like, what are new ideas that you're playing with, or techniques or creative communication that you're like, hey, I think this is going to help us continue to, we're not only giving sermons to cameras anymore. There's people in the room, but we're building on that. We're kind of heading into whatever the next season is. Like, where do you guys see your?
I think one thing we're really excited about on our team at Soul City right now, and like the language that we found as a creative team, is we're talking a lot right now about we love our language at Soul City. We love alliteration. We do all the cheesy pastor things, right? But we talk a lot about innovative methods that lead to intentional moments. So for a long time, we have a value of like, we don't want to just keep doing the same thing over and over. Yeah. We very much want to be innovating and creating new and different things. And so for a long time, we had literal like ministry goals that we want to do in this 6-month run, 10 new and different gathering elements that we haven't done in the last year at least.
That's awesome.
Which is great, and it flexes our muscle of trying new things. Yep. The addition that we're doing now is the intentional moment, that it can't just be new for the sake of new.
Right.
Now we want to use an innovative method. We want to try something new, but it has to create an intentional moment for our people to connect with God.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to play a game or connect with one another. So if we're going to play a game that's just like silly and fun, that's fine. We can do that, but we can't count that towards an intentional moment. Yeah. If we're going to design a game that intentionally puts people in connection with people that they have never met before within the gathering, great. That's an intentional moment of connection that we just created. And so I think, to answer the question more directly, for me right now, we've had a culture at Soul City for a long time of trying innovative methods. What we're trying to connect all that creativity towards now is it has to drive toward an intentional moment. Because if it's not, then it's just frill. It's just entertainment. And there's a lot better places you can go for just frill and entertainment than a church.
Yes.
A lot better.
Yeah.
I used to work in them, I used to work in the theater world, and a lot of it is frill and entertainment and fun. And there's value in that. They can do that far better than we can in the church. Yes. Netflix can do that far better than we can in the church. Yeah. I don't know if they can create intentional moments of connection with the creator of the universe as well as we can.
That's so good. Because I see a lot of churches trying to be to match the level of entertainment value that everybody else consumes on a daily basis every day. And it can come off as really, really bad and really cheesy or very inauthentic. Yeah. But I love that like your whole staff or your team, the creative team, is rallying around, hey, we're going to try blank number of things. Because so often I think we've seen it's a handful of people on a team that want to try a bunch of new stuff. And there's other people that are like, no, we already tried this 3 years ago and it sucked. We don't ever want to do it again. But to be able to win and lose as a team of like, oh, that did not work at all the way we thought, or this element that we put in the service totally flopped, and we're not going to do that again.
That's good. Yeah.
But you're doing it all together, and you're all deciding we're going to try this or we're not, versus one person trying something.
Yeah, I think
told you it wasn't going to work.
It's been a transition, almost a 3-act transition of I remember, we set ministry goals for every 6-month cycle, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And I remember we used to have ministry goals that were specifically around like mistake-free gatherings or distraction-free gatherings. Like our whole goal is to just not make a mistake. That we used to do that. Yeah. And then it became, okay, it's not about not making a mistake. It's actually about trying new things. And it, we don't reach the goal if we do it perfectly. We reach the goal if we tried. And now it's so much more, it's not about not making a mistake. It's not about doing something different. It's about doing everything that we can to maximize every moment that we have in that gathering for someone to have a connection with God, themselves, or others, to help lead them into greater love of God, greater love of others, and a greater love of themselves. Like, that's what it's really about. And so if there's tons of mistakes, that's fine. We'll work on fixing those because we want to be excellent in all that we do, but that's not the goal. Yeah. Like, Sunday is not successful if we hit every cue exactly and we, had 0 minutes over on planning center. Yeah. Not a successful Sunday in my eyes. Yeah. It's a successful Sunday if we maximized all the minutes that we planned for in leading people where we believe God is calling us to lead them.
And I think that's much more measurable, or you're able to look at that and decide as a team like, oh, that was an intentional moment. Versus it is a very superficial thing to look at, distractions as the marker. I mean, I'm guilty of that for years. Like, that was our thing with our team. Like, our entire job is to try to create distraction-free environment, so that they can do whatever, they need to do on the platform. Right. And there's some truth to that, for me who was in production, but I think the intentionality people care about significantly more. It goes right back to what you're saying. Like, if you want good entertainment, you can get it anywhere else that's really, really good at a very high production value. Whether you're going to the movies or you're watching something on Netflix or going to a Broadway show.
And at the end of the day, especially if you're working in an environment where there's a lot of volunteers, the mistakes they're just going to happen. Yeah. Period. End of story. And I would rather us make those mistakes in the pursuit of something we really believe in or we feel is new and exciting and will be meaningful for people, rather than make those mistakes in pursuit of the same thing we always do.
Yeah. Well, it also gives you more like energy and drive towards why would we try to do this a little differently next time so that we don't have this miss or this, fumble or whatever. Well, we're moving towards, that's not the goal. Like, that's just a tool that we're all getting to work in together to move us towards this goal that we're all really excited about. Yeah. And so there's like meaning and purpose even as you're working to get better and, grow teams and grow skills and that. And it's not just for its own sake.
Right.
We had Lindsay Van Wyk on the podcast a while back, and we touched on this a little bit, and I'd be interested to hear your perspective of, Soul City is in the middle of Chicago. Yeah. You are in the city. The congregation, we were joking before we started recording about, like, I live very far out in the suburbs. It's not Chicago anywhere. And the different demographic of people that show up and how that plays into maybe how you craft your services. And do you feel like there's intentionality that you guys have to do around that for the people that are walking in that have very different, I don't want to say they have different beliefs or perspective, but it's a different demographic.
We have a whole range of different backgrounds.
It's far greater of a range than my church.
Yeah.
Out in the suburbs.
In my 7+ years at Soul City now, there has really been a transition and a change in terms of the demographic and who you see at Soul City. It has grown far more diverse in as many ways as you can imagine. But particularly from like a race and ethnicity standpoint, we do a congregational survey every fall, and last fall was the first time our church is majority non-white now.
That's cool.
Yeah, which is really cool and really exciting, especially not just in general, but because of where we're located. Yeah. We're located in the West Loop of Chicago. And so we're drawing folks from the South, from the West, and from the North, and even some from the suburbs as well. And our church is starting to look more like, the city that it is serving. Yeah. Whereas 7 years ago, it was diverse, but majority white still, So that in and of itself is exciting, but it's one thing for the people to show up. It's another thing to be able to actually serve and minister to people from different backgrounds, who have different upbringings, but within church and outside of church. And so the first thing I think for me was like, it was an education, because I have one perspective in terms of what church is and what even like excellent, successful church means, or good church, quote unquote, is. And I have learned very, very quickly just how suburban and white and evangelical that is. That's not normal. That's just my perspective. Yep. And it has taken relationship with people to learn that. And so how that kind of now manifests in our Sunday gatherings, it manifests in everything we do. It manifests in song choice for sure. We know that Soul City has a specific sound that we go for in worship, but we are also very willing to step outside of that. The way that the language we like to use is we want it to feel like home for people, which everyone wants their church to feel like home, but we don't mean that our church feels like home. We want it to remind you of wherever your first spiritual home was, And sometimes that's in a song choice. Sometimes that's just in the way that the worship pastor is leading the song. That they're leading it in a way where like, yes, that's how we did it at my mom's church or whatever it might be. That comes down to like what we choose to highlight and even give time and energy towards in our announcements or vision slot. Pointing people. We talked a little bit before the gathering of our church has a really high value, and our people have an expectation that when it comes to things like cultural months, Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage, AAPI, things like Juneteenth, all of that, that we would not just like check the box and do the church thing of it's MLK weekend, what a great legacy, but we would create meaningful space to honor or to celebrate. And the same is true, for other things that are happening currently, like the Sonia Massey shooting and the video that came out this week as we're recording this. Like, there's just no world where our church, where there are so many Black women there, aren't not only expecting, but needing their church to say something. Because they just watched this video of a Black woman getting shot, and they're thinking of themselves, they're thinking of their daughter, they're thinking of their mother. And so what does that mean? Within our gathering, we were going to do something. We scrapped it. We're holding a moment of prayer in our gathering this Sunday for that. I think it's just been always keeping our people in mind. I've started, even in my sermon prep, I'll put 4 to 6 names at the top of my doc just to make sure that my examples are not coded in my white, male, straight evangelical background. Because I could easily come up with those examples that'll speak to me in my context, but how is it going to speak to the 40-year-old, Puerto Rican single mom? I got to think through that. Because I want this sermon to speak to her as well as it speaks to me. I
mean, that's huge. And if, other teaching pastors or senior pastors that are listening, like it's a very important thing. And I think for you guys, it's a perfect example because of the demographic shift that is so vastly different. But I also don't think that can't be used in the white suburban church on the suburbs.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier around, we were talking about where you position yourself in relation to your congregation. Like, are you running ahead of them with all the answers, or are you willing to humbly, even as you're preparing your content, think, I actually don't have all the perspectives and all the answers, and I want to learn and explore and hear from other voices so that I can communicate in a better way than I could on my own. Because what's cool about that, you talked earlier about like creating community and like people connecting with each other. Like, now you're even inviting community into your own, this message that from the outside looks like it's just you on the stage, alone up there sharing. But in preparation, you can actually make it so much more than that when you're actually inviting in the perspectives and the relationships and the lived experience that you're connecting with within your community to then have so much more impact and be so much more of an encouragement and creating that safe place for the people that are there.
Yeah, Jarrett, one of our lead pastors, he likes to say, who are you bringing up there with you? When you walk up there, who in our church is coming up there with you, who's on your mind, who has spoken into this, you know, because you never want to go up there alone. Because I've made that mistake.
Yeah.
I've gone up there alone and then tried to speak to someone with a different background than my own, and I have no clue.
Yeah.
You know, I have no clue what they're going through or what it's like, you know. So I got to, as best I can, and I do it very imperfectly, do my work to learn.
And that takes effort and time and conversation.
Sure.
And, you know, it's easy to just kind of get into the day-to-day of like, I'm just doing the tasks ahead of me.
Yeah.
And not, you have to be intentional to get outside of that track and to have those conversations. And it's kind of like we were talking earlier around where you might not say that word to someone or that encouragement to someone because it feels kind of awkward. This can be the same thing where these conversations don't always come up naturally.
Yeah.
You have to pursue them out of like, hey, I actually think this is valuable and I'm actually genuinely interested in growing and learning. And it's not going to happen just sort of on autopilot.
And I'll say, because we're three white guys sitting at this table right now, like, I think one thing I've learned in that work by making a lot of mistakes is you have to release this desire to do it right, to have the conversation in the right way. Because really what that is that's self-preservation, you know, and that's pride, and that's, you know, whatever's behind that. You have to be willing to just be wrong and be messy about it and rely on relationship and grace, you know. I think when I've made the most mistakes is when I've tried to like get it right or say it right or ask the question right. You know, now it's like, no, I'm gonna show up. I was doing this with someone on our team this week. I'm like, hey, I feel this desire to ask you about something, and I might ask it in a way that just comes off totally wrong, and I'm really, really sorry. Please, you know, help me a little bit, you know, or help me to help myself, whatever it is.
And again, that just comes back to this like humility and being willing to put yourself in the position of a learner and not having to have all the answers. I feel like, you know, that idea of trying something, getting feedback from people around you and being willing to accept it and say, as a gift and say, thank you so much for sharing. Here's how I can now move forward in a better way. Like, if we as Christians should be in the most safe and secure place to do that. Like that's literally the whole idea of what we're saying we're doing is learning, growing, changing. You know, like if we can't do that as leaders in the church, like how are we calling our people to that?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's not about you being right or doing it right. It's about you learning how to serve those people better.
Yeah. And there's a lot of truth to doing that when you're the person on the platform. It speaks a lot of, I think it speaks a lot of openness and authenticity to the people, maybe just like other staff members who aren't on the platform, and they go, "Oh, you're asking my, like my, you know, about my feedback for your whatever it is, this topic you might be talking on or whatever." It makes me feel like I have a voice, even though I'm not on the platform too, and I think that's really important for other staff at churches to be able to do. Like, I mean, even my last church I was on staff at, like we were on a random, I can't remember how often a year, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, like I was on the rotation to like read the sermon before it went up on a Wednesday or Thursday, and I had to provide feedback. And I was like, ooh, me? Like, you want me to do that? You know? And sometimes it was taken, sometimes it wasn't, but it was like, it was the first time in my life and career that I had been asked to look at a sermon before and the script and go, hey, what do you think? Is there something I need to cut or not? I'm like, oh, okay, that's super interesting. But it felt like there was empowerment in you know, what we were doing, and that, oh, my voice, even though I'm 30 years younger than, you know, the pastor who was doing that sermon, my voice was able to, you know, speak into that, which is whether it's used or not.
That brings to mind for me just like the joy of collaboration even. You know, one thing that I have tried to do a lot sitting in the seat that I sit, we just had like a third Christmas meeting this past week. And at those types of meetings, I'm like, obviously the creative team will be there, but I'm like, I want anybody else there too. Cause like I love the creative team's ideas, but I know what they're going to bring. Yeah. You know, I know the feedback they're going to bring. I know the idea that Lindsay's going to have, you know, whatever it is. And they're great. That's why they're on the team.
Snow machines.
Yeah, exactly. But what I don't know is what our kids director might say. What I don't know is what, our ministry operations manager is going to have in terms of an idea, or even what perspective they're going to bring on the ideas we already have. Right. Because they're also they're gonna inherit this theme and then have to walk it out. Why not give them an opportunity to speak into it as well?
That's good.
I love that. One of the things that we like to, ask questions before we start the podcast and send them over to our guests and stuff like that. One of the things that you had written in there when we asked what are challenging things that you're going through, which is good. It seems like you guys have had some turnover on your staff since you've been there. And you're not alone in the churches in the country. I think every church in the country could say, oh yeah, we had a massive amount of turnover from even 2020 to 2022, right? In just those 2 years of post-COVID and, all these things. What has that been like for you in the spirit of collaboration? As a staff from the outside, it sounds like very collaborative, and then you guys are all, able to do this. But it's hard when you have new people entering or leaving the equation, throughout a staff that is a tight-knit community of people that, are with each other a lot.
Yeah, so it's hard to give the context simply, but I think the context is important. So the fact that we're a church in a major metropolitan area means we have just naturally higher turnover because a major metropolitan area, people live there anywhere between 18 and 36 months usually, and then they move somewhere else to a different city, to the suburbs, or whatever it is. And so we see that turnover in our congregation. Certainly, it's almost like a youth ministry model. It just is not formalized.
Sure.
It's like with youth ministry, you got that kid for 4 years and then they're out. We just know kind of internally that most people we're going to have them for
just have
18 to 24.
Move up Sunday.
For real.
Hey, you've all made it here 1 year.
You're now in your second year.
You're now moving forward.
Which it might be your final year, whatever it is.
If you've been here for 4 years, you're really a senior, and we need you to lead those younger.
For real, though, you are a veteran at our church if you've been there for 3 years, straight up. And there's plenty of people like that, but we also know, there's a lot of turnover in a city. That also, forever has been the truth on our staff as well because of where we're located. I think it was then heightened or put onto steroids with COVID as well. And so, I lead our creative team, which at the time I started leading that team was comprised of 6 staff members plus me. We had, within a 2-year span, I think we had 8 departures on that team and brought on,
that's a lot.
I think I've brought on only 2 new people.
Okay.
So we've had more departures than we have positions.
Yeah.
And some of those positions, a lot of those positions we did not backfill. Those, they just disappeared.
Yeah.
We don't have a graphic designer on staff anymore, for example, things like that. So that was just a lot, especially for me as someone who this was the first time me formally managing or leading a team on a full-time staff. I'd done it at summer camps and things like that before, but not we're here year round doing this thing. It was a lot to manage those departures and try and manage them well, and love those people well in their departures. And then also in bringing new people on and figuring out, how to fill it in between. I think the unexpected gifts in it, though, one, I've gotten a fast track masterclass in hiring and the interview process, and we're hiring a role right now, and I have other staff members looking to me for wisdom on it, and I'm like, that feels a little silly, but I'm like, I've done this 3 or 4 times now. It's just a very tight window of doing it. And then the other blessing was when you're a manager and someone that you're leading leaves the team, you inherit their responsibilities.
Yep.
And so I've done a lot of the jobs on our team now. I've been our tech director for a season, and I have felt the weeds of that job. Yeah. I've felt the tensions. I know the difficult parts of it. And, I know Laz, most people, maybe even listening to this, will know Laz, who's our tech director, or essentially our tech director at Soul City. I don't manage him anymore, but I know what he walks through every single week. So now if I'm going to make an ask of Laz, I know the weight of that ask. Yeah. I'm not the person who's coming in and being like, can you just do this? Thanks so much. I'm like, I know even from a technical perspective, I'm like, I know that takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So can we do that?
Yeah.
Or when can we do that? Like, it just helps with that empathy. I know I've been our marketing and communications manager, and so now when I'm leading Richard on our staff, like I know the pressure that it is to have to come up with content every single day and put it out there. I know how much time it takes to do a simple idea of interviewing someone for 5 minutes and creating a 1-minute version of that interview. I know what that takes. That doesn't mean I don't make the ask, but it does mean I think on their end, there's a greater level of understanding or empathy or compassion.
It also puts you in a place where you can collaborate and strategize together.
Oh, for
because
sure.
You can speak to that language and that experience and, assist almost, come alongside, support in a way that you can't if you don't have those experiences.
Yeah. Like I've sat in this seat. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know what
I
that
think we
is.
should have like a TV show, TMZ, where I just swap jobs in church with somebody else for like a week. Just 7 days. Like,
It's
what
like
would it do if I had to be the children's pastor? I'd be like, oh my gosh, we got to hit our times in planning center a little faster because I can't do this for 65 minutes with all these kids.
Go and sit in there for a little
That's
bit.
a good idea. We should do this.
You should pitch it.
TMZ.
Yeah.
That's our pitch.
Or it's just your consulting, your leadership consulting with the church. It's like, hey, we're going to come in and we're just going to do a switch up Sunday.
That's right.
We're going
We're gonna figure out what are all the tensions between the staff.
Oh man, you'll find out.
And then you're
quick.
just gonna move, just reverse.
But there's so much truth to that.
It's like Freaky Friday for church.
Oh yeah.
Just imagine if I was in the seat of any other person on staff, like my perspective of a teaching pastor and why they're getting their stuff to me on Saturday
Yep.
at 6 p.m. I'm like, I don't understand, man. And then if I were to have to do it, I go, oh, now I understand.
Yep.
My ChatGPT sermon isn't as good as what it was, even though I finished it on Thursday night, or whatever.
Or for me as a pastor, when I have this genius idea for a slide that would just be amazing, I've made the slides. I know what's an easy slide to make and what I can't make in ProPresenter, and I'm going to have to make in Photoshop from scratch and then upload into that,
So now you can just make your own slides.
Yeah, which,
you're set. You're good.
sometimes I have for many seasons.
So funny, man. Gosh, it's a cool perspective that you have, and I think that there's a lot of truth to having people sit in those seats and be able to understand what you do, and not just from hey, we're all going to sit around a staff meeting and sing Kumbaya, and I understand you and your job. It's very different than that. It's like a true understanding and family relationship and love with one another to go, hey, I see that what I'm doing might be a lot to ask from you or not. And this, especially from senior leadership and down, that just makes such an enormous difference.
Well, and I would say as cool as your guys' consulting agency would be in doing the Freaky Friday for churches, there is something that we can do without that. And that is just letting people see you, verbalizing what it is like to be in your shoes, not from a complaining standpoint, not from a place of like, well, just so you know, that's going to be, not from that standpoint, but just simply like I, all the time as the person, at Soul City who kind of holds the Sunday gathering from like a high level, not just the programming of it, not just the worship, not just the production, really looking at the whole experience from a ministry standpoint. There's a lot of pressures coming in. Hey, can we announce this thing? Hey, can we talk about this thing? Can we talk about that thing? And Lindsay and I really together, we have to kind of hold the line of knowing like, hey, we know we got 65 minutes or less here. And it's pretty tight for us. So we got to keep it tight. One thing I found a lot of success in is just letting people see that tension a little bit of like, hey, I hear that, the camp that's coming up is really, really important for us to announce. I also want you to know right now, we also have a baptism coming up and we want to talk about this new initiative. And we're in the middle of a capital campaign that is going to launch a second church and we need to update the people where we're at.
Yep.
And so I'm going to fight all I can to get that announcement in on a Sunday. If we can't, let's try it. Just letting them see what you're holding. And that goes for every position.
Oh, yeah.
Just letting them see what you're holding a little bit.
Because the positions that we all have in ministry, it's the most important thing is whatever we're doing. Because that's our job. I'm focused on this. This is super important to me. Just like the youth pastor's summer camp is super important to him. And capital campaign is important to the executive pastor and blah, 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 all around the circle. But having that perspective, I think, is just like, yeah, it's so necessary. And that's where I think a lot of tension in churches and church staff would be mitigated if we all knew and sat in each other's shoes a little bit.
Because if you don't say it, then you're just left to what we would call at Soul City. You're just left to write a story.
Yeah.
You just write whatever story you want about why they said no.
Yeah. And
why they reacted weird to your idea.
Our brains are amazing at writing. I write some incredible stories.
You do.
I write good stories in my head about why somebody said something to me.
It's because they don't like me, or it's because they don't value marriage ministry, or it's because I was like, it might not be that.
Oh my gosh,
dude,
this is thank you for being here and talking with us about this stuff. If people want to go visit your old YouTube channel or Instagram.
I've actually started to make some videos again.
Let's
first
go,
time
dude.
in like 4 years. So.
It's just your sermons from church reposted.
Yeah, just repost.
Well, I looked the other day, and there's a lot of subscribers there. There's almost half a million.
Yeah, there's a decent amount.
That's a lot.
Decent amount. Yeah. Yeah. So my YouTube channel is still there. It has like 800 some odd videos on it or something like that. It's just my name.
Hey, if you're in youth ministry and you want to use that stuff, it's still there.
Use it.
Can a Christian blank?
Yeah.
There you go. Get your whole series planned.
Some people still do. But yeah, that's a great place. Or find me on like Instagram or whatever like
Jon
that.
Jorgenson on YouTube.
Yeah, just search the name.
Dude,
it should come up.
Awesome, man.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to encourage those listening, we've got creative leaders, senior leaders, tech leaders, all kinds of different people that are involved in the ministry that happens in churches. Like, if you were going to encourage them, what, as we said earlier, would you have a word? What would be your word for those brothers and sisters?
That's a great question. I think I would probably just say that the work that you do is really important. Probably more important than we realize or give it credit for, regardless of how long we've been in it. I think we understand, how important it is, and then you have a Sunday where you see someone in your church have like a legitimate breakthrough moment with God, and you're like, whoa, that's what we're talking about. Like, that's why we're here. And so I would just say the work that you do matters. It's important. It's not easy. And it's really messy. But keep going.
Yeah.
It's good.
That's a great word, man. Thank you. Again, man, thank you again for being here, and
thank you guys. Thanks for doing this podcast.
Yeah,
I sort of like buried the lead. I'm a fan. I'm a listener, and and it's been a blessing to me. I think the church needs spaces like this where people within ministry can have open, honest conversations about it and about the tensions and about some of that messiness. But that takes someone kind of raising their hand and leading the way in that. And you guys have done that. So
thanks, man.
Well done.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. Well, until next time.
Until next time.
Thanks.